Okay, welcome everybody to Quarantine Break. I'm founder Kiana Martin of Eat Soccer. And in this morning's session, I'm so excited to have with us Chuck Holliday. He has worked running the cameras at WNBC for New York. He has served as a producer on a variety of shows at networks like Bravo, Oxygen, Fox Business Channel, Fox Business News. And so we're excited to hear about his story. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll weave them in. And without further ado, let's find out who's the camera guy. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Kiana. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
So what sparked your interest in working on the production side of the media industry?
It's interesting because I worked as a photographer for a few years from maybe 2002 on, and then maybe around 2007, a close friend of mine had, she was a hair model, I believe, and recommended that I try out video. And I said, nah, that's not really my thing. And she says, well, I have a gig, to do a testimonial video. And I said, well, how are you going to hire me? I don't have a camera. And she says, I own a camera right behind me. And I have money right here. I have an envelope with your money. So let's go ahead and get to work. And that was my first foray into video. I barely knew what I was doing. But then also another friend of mine who worked in model management hosted a show called Official Heat up in Buffalo on the ABC affiliate up there. And her camera person, who was based in New York City, he decided to leave after a day of filming, or maybe 1 hour of filming. So she had nobody to turn to. So she called me as her kind of last resort and said, hey, look, I have this camera, I have this show, I have nobody to film it. If I give you this camera, can you learn it in a week? Because I got to turn in shows, I got to turn in episodes. And I told her, cool. She met up with me by Madison Square Garden, gave me the bag of the camera and all of that. And I literally learned in about 5 days. And we went in, and I want to say it was like a Bad Boy release party. This was back in maybe 07, 08. That was my first video filming. She turned in the episode to Buffalo, ABC, I believe it was like WKBW. And that was it. We were off and running, and I literally became a camera operator out of nowhere. And I had to learn on the fly, but I used a lot of my instincts in terms of just understanding what I did not want to see on camera, or what I did not want to do behind the scenes. And that was really my start, and just kind of just learned a lot. I walked around and just kind of, walking through New York, you get a lot of visuals and things like that. But I was able to just kind of learn and just ask from people who are already in the business. And I've been figuring it out now for about 12 years.
That's amazing. So pretty much you have a background in photography. And how did you get introduced to that? Was it you were self-taught, just picked up a camera, or you had an interest?
Yeah. I had a friend of mine who, she was in modeling, and she had did a couple of hip hop movies. She needed somebody to take some photos of her and like her friends at a birthday party. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I ended up buying a camera. I was working in banking, I think, at the time. So I bought the camera and did some photos. But then she did a photo shoot. Her cameraman never showed up. Her photographer never showed up for the photo shoot. And she was in Queens. So she asked me, hey, can you come from Brooklyn to Queens to do the photo shoot? And I went ahead and threw on what I had, and threw my camera in the bag and raced out to Queens, knocked out the photo shoot. And from there, she says, okay, I'm going to introduce you to about 5 or 6, maybe 7 of my friends. I'm going to have you do photo shoots with all of them. After that, you're on your own. And that's exactly what she did. She had maybe about 5 of her friends do photo shoots with me. So that way I can kind of get a feel for everything. And she literally said, all right, you're on your own. Figure it out. And yeah, that's how I became a photographer, literally. And I met up with a publicist who was just starting out. She needed a client. I needed a mouthpiece because I'm not a good speaker. And by default, we became kind of working partners. And I have to credit a lot of my early success to Tamara Walkover at Quintessential PR.
So pretty much, it seems like a lot of your opportunities or first opportunities came to you because you agreed to just be available. It seemed like you were Mr. Dependable. Like if people were in a pinch, it was like, okay, we can use him.
Yeah, I mean, I credit it more to relationships though. I had these relationships, for instance, the woman from Buffalo, Kenya Thomas, I had already worked with her a few years prior. Speed from the Spartan firm, I had did some video work for her for a client a few years prior as well. Tamara, I already had that relationship with, just from being out and about in the city. And it was just the relationships, the relationships are everything. You can have as many skill sets and somewhat connections as you can, but you have to have those relationships within the connections.
Share with us how you received, we told us how you received your first opportunity. So what was your thought when you received this camera and you really didn't know how to use it? Did you go online or did you just play around with this?
First and foremost, I'm looking around like, who gave me a $1,500 camera? Look, I'm born and raised in Brevoort projects. Same projects is fabulous. So, my thought process is, who's giving me this camera? I'm not a video person. But yeah, I went on YouTube and I looked up a couple of people who were filming some of their own things, John Ricard, and I looked up like some local shows like Video City, things like that. And I just wanted to get a sense of how the cameraman moved, because I wasn't worried about the person in front of my camera. I was more worried about making sure I knew how to move. I knew how to kind of focus on one thing, focus on another thing. So those were the things to me. YouTube was just starting at the time, actually. It was maybe only a year or two in, so it was pretty raw and it wasn't what it is now. And that's how I learned, really, just doing that. And I called around to people who have been on camera already and asked them for their experiences working with cameramen.
Awesome. What was the path you took from being a camera operator to actually a producer with networks?
This is crazy. So this sounds very whacked out. So work with me here. After a couple of years into working with WKBW Buffalo, mailing in those episodes to Buffalo, I accidentally emailed who I thought was a friend of mine, Aaron. I thought it was somebody who was a friend of the close friend I had. In reality, it was Erin Kitsey from NBC Universal, and she handled communications and things like that. I don't know how I got her email. So I accidentally emailed her about doing, I think it was the Wyclef Haitian Ambassador Conference or something like that. And she says, hey, wrong person, wrong Aaron, but you know what? I'll forward this over to Human Resources. We can always use somebody at NBC. So I said, whatever. I laughed it off. And then I got a call maybe a year later to come in and interview. And I didn't know how the structure of NBC worked. So I interviewed and I'm saying, okay, what am I interviewing for? And they place you in a division. So when I first, NBC New York hired me, and it was Michael Jack, who's a very veteran, grizzled guy. He's been around. He worked in DC. Older guy. He was about to ready to retire. And he says, all right, look, kid, because he called me the kid. He said, look, kid, I'm going to have you holding wires. This is your job. Don't touch a camera. And that was my first foray in there. And I was working at CNBC. And I held the cameras. And then he moved me over to Channel 4, NBC New York. And he said the same thing. Don't touch a camera. Don't do nothing. Just watch. And I think it was a Saturday morning there. One of the cameramen called out. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at my camera. I'm looking at my boss like it was like the puffy stare down, and I'm looking at him like, you're going to hire me here. And he says, oh, okay, kid, I'm going to put you on. And he said, but don't F up or you're out of here before the commercial break. He was serious.
I know he's serious. So how did you feel being given kind of that, this is the standard, or, you're out of a job?
I was nervous. Look, I told him, oh, yeah, I got this. This is nothing. Inside, I'm up here I was nervous because my thought is, okay, I'm now broadcasting to all of New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut. This can go off the rails. You know, I always laugh at when they make mess ups on camera. So now I'm saying, okay, now I'm on the board here. But it went good. I just followed my instincts in terms of not saying too much. I went over and made sure my anchors knew who I was. I just tried to make sure that, you know, anything they needed from me and things like that, they knew I was new. So they obviously treated me like a rookie, but it worked and I didn't give them any issues. And they brought me back the next week and, you know, they had me come back and do camera again. And pretty much that person got reassigned to another day. And they started me out on weekends. And I was maybe the third cameraman in charge. So basically, I had really no input power, but I was still a camera person and I was there. And I got to learn a lot.
At what point in that position, operating the camera, did you start to feel comfortable like, okay, I know what I'm doing, especially because was it a camera you were used to working with or?
No. It was these big, huge $10,000 cameras. So my first thought was, I'm not breaking this. I better not break this. When I started feeling comfortable, believe it or not, was when I ended up getting hired over at thisis50.com, which was in 2009. And Speed, who I just mentioned earlier from the Spartan firm, wanted to bring me in. And I said, I don't know if you want to do that. And she brought me in to do a show called The Roundtable Show with Lenny S., who's now over at Rock Nation under Kodak Lens. That's his thing. But we did it's like a hip hop late night talk show. And I came in and the first guest was Fabulous, who I grew up with in Brevoort. And we didn't like each other. We used to fight a lot. So so I wanted to look like I was the man, so to speak. And that was where I really became comfortable because they gave me a lot of creative control. And I basically asked for it. I said, well, I want control of the audio sync. I want to make sure the audio syncs into the camera. They weren't doing that at the time. I said, and I'm bringing in my own cameras. I'm bringing in HD cameras. They didn't have HD cameras. So Lenny said, okay, all right, knock yourself out. You want all this extra work? Knock yourself out. And I did that, and I showed up to This Is 50 like this every day in a suit because I wanted to separate myself from everybody. I didn't want nobody to talk to me like that. And that's how I got comfortable, honestly. It really wasn't at NBC New York. It was at This Is 50 where I got comfortable. And then by the time they moved me at NBC New York, they moved me over to weekdays, and then I was filling in at CNBC and MSNBC. By the time all of that happened, then I was smooth. I was good money.
So I'm curious, since you and Fabulous kind of had this ongoing like standoff rivalry, how was that that encounter when you saw him later at This Is 50?
We laughed because he looked at me and, you know, we grew, I've known him since I was 7. He's maybe a year younger than me. And then his brother, his older brother is around my age. Now, me and the older brother used to fight all the time. I lost all of those. So I lost all of those fights. So when he saw me, he looked at me and he's saying, him and his brother are there and they're looking at me and they're saying, Dave is my family name. And they're looking at me and saying, Dave, what are you doing here? And I didn't say anything, and I went back to go film. So Lenny S is saying, yeah, this is some new cameraman we got. He claims he's from Brevoort, but we think he's from like Roosevelt Island or something. And Fab says, no, he's from Brevoort, you know, and his brother is on the camera. He's saying, nah, he's from Brevoort. We used to have a lot of fights, you know. And I had no problem chiming in. Yeah, I lost all of them, you know, and I didn't, look, I don't mind. I don't get caught up in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was kind of surreal. He's staring at me, and then another guy that grew up with us came up there, and he's, what are you doing here? He said, what are you doing on this camera? And yeah, I mean, from there we actually kind of smooth things out and stuff like that. So it was funny, but yeah, it was crazy.
Do you have any encounters with the man himself, 50 Cent? And
yeah, actually, when I was there, so Nelson, I forget his last name, he ran This Is 50. So he was more or less the day-to-day guy, good guy. So I was talking to him about another show that they wanted me to do. And he comes in, 50 comes in, and Tony Yayo, I believe is his name, comes in. So they come in, and by this time, the show that I was producing was hot. It was red hot. We had everybody on there. And Nelson says, hey, Chuck, I'm going to introduce you to, this is 50 Cent. 50, this is Chuck. So 50's, yeah, nice to meet you, man. I said, nice to meet you, Mr. Cent. Because I was thrown off, so I wasn't thinking. He says, I like that. Nelson, you got to keep this guy here. He said, in fact, give him another show. So it kind of became a joke. And then when I met Yayo, I did the same thing. I said, nice to meet you, Mr. Yayo. And, you know, for me, I didn't care. I don't get caught up in egos and all that. I thought it was funny. They were laughing along with it. And they actually thought they knew me by that. So they would always come in and see me and say, my man, Chuck. And I'll be like, Mr. Yayo, you know, and I had the whole office laughing and stuff like that. 50's a very good dude. He's a smart dude, very insightful, candid, and smart dude who had no problem just sharing his knowledge, wisdom, and things like that. Good guy, very good guy. I know he gets a lot of flack in the media, but good dude. He speaks to everybody. He treats everybody the same. I like that.
So describe your typical day as a camera operator for a show or network. Especially, and then also, like, do a lot of camera people come in as the person who's just holding the wires, or was that a situation unique, or holding the lines? Was that just unique to you?
No, I think some people do. I don't think that's everybody, but some people do. Obviously, when you're getting hired at a network like that, they're not going to just bring you in and just throw you immediately on camera. They don't trust you with their livelihood like that. So I think a typical day for me as a camera operator, you go in maybe a couple of hours before, you get an idea of what you're filming. What I like to do is always speak to the on-air talent. I like to, especially if it's women, I always like to ask them, what is their good side? What is their profile side? What do they like? Because at the end of the day, I don't really matter here. Making sure that they get the finished product the way they want it matters. So, you know, you're on camera, you do a lot of takes. If it's a scripted show or a tape show, it's a lot of takes. If it's a live show, you pretty much come in a couple of hours before, you sit in a production meeting, you really don't say anything because you're not part of that. And you just make sure that you understand what they're trying to do. And yeah, you go live, and live is definitely an animal, and it is a beast that not a lot of people can do.
It's a constant adrenaline rush of making you have to be on top of so many different
yes
things.
And there's no do-overs, so you have to be, everything is so remotely operated that you have to have the camera planted here, or you have to make sure that your anchor is ready to go. Little things like that, which you're in charge of. So, you know, I have to make sure, like when I worked at NBC New York in the morning, I had to make sure Darlene was not drinking anything. I had to make sure that Michael G didn't have his cell phone visible on the desk. Little things like that. Now, for certain other anchors, they don't care. Like Pat Battle's going to have her phone on her desk. She's been there for so long that you can't talk to her like that. That's not nice. But yeah, you just want to make sure that they're happy, because one mess up and you usually are reprimanded.
Wow.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is what Michael Jack and a couple of other people told me. Once you learn how to be a live camera operator and do live programming, you will get hired anywhere, everywhere, no matter what, because that's a gift and that's a job that you can travel the world and get hired at. And I was able to do that briefly. And I worked at a lot of networks for that very reason. So
how did your duties as a camera operator differ from that of a producer?
Ooh, a lot. As a producer, you are pretty much in charge of making sure whoever the talent is booked shows up. You're making sure that your on-air person is ready to go. Their setup is good. Depending on the level of show or the level of where you're at, if it's an indie show or indie project you're working on yourself, you're usually in charge of everything. For Suite 929, which is my digital network, I'm in charge of pretty much everything. I make sure the cameras are good. I make sure my subject's lighting is good. I make sure the on-air person is happy. Even making sure the scripts flow a certain way, so that way I can make sure that the editing is on point, or whoever edits. You're in charge of everything, really, except for being on air. As a camera operator, you're basically just there to film, and you're there to put the producer's vision to light. So you really don't have any input as a camera operator, unless it's for the better of sequencing. Like if this doesn't look like it makes sense, then yeah, you can chime in. But as a camera operator, you're really just there to make sure that the vision comes to life. As a producer, you're in charge of everything, even down to the booking, everything.
What are some of the funny things that happen in your line of work?
Ooh, I was working on the show over at Bravo. It was called The Singles Project. This aired maybe in 2014, I want to say. At the time, I was still working at NBC, but they knew that I can film and do all of that. So they pulled me out of the building and put me on the field. That's what they call it when you go to produce. And I came in to basically cut down their budget. So the show ran over budget. The show didn't even air yet. We were already over budget, and we had to cut costs down, and we changed 2 cast members during production. So I had to come in and clean up the mess. And one of the parts is we had no money to get a restaurant to close up for us, nothing like that. So I was able to get a friend who ran a hotel, and we shot at the rooftop of the hotel. We had to do a restaurant dating scene. So they let me use the rooftop, and, you know, I set it up, couple of tables, couple of lobby tables, make it look like it was a restaurant. I took some room service food, slapped it on the table. I told them, don't eat this. This is just for the scene. We were ready to go, and then I learned, wait a minute, we have no waiter. We have no server or no waiter to make the scene look real. So I had to go back to NBC. I grabbed a suit out of NBC, because everybody keeps a suit at NBC for emergency reasons. And I used an anchor. I'm not going to say what anchor because he's national. I used an anchor's tie and made it a bow tie, and came back to the set, which was maybe about 15 blocks down. It was like on Chelsea. Yeah, it was like in Chelsea. And
Okay.
yeah. Went back to the hotel. This was like in the wee hours of the morning, because we had to film it early and get ready. I had to go on air as the waiter because we couldn't hire anybody. We were over budget. So I went ahead and made sure the scene was set, and I went in and served them their food, basically, or I grabbed their food as if I was a restaurant waiter, because we were so far over budget, I couldn't get anybody to do anything. And I'm rare that I actually was on camera.
How did you keep the characters from not giggling that you all were improvising in this manner?
Say it again.
I said, how did you keep the characters that were on screen from kind of giggling at the
They were laughing. They were laughing, but they knew what we had to do. And what happened was Lee, who was one of the cast members, he just started making jokes during the filming. So when we were actually rolling, he was making jokes with the other cast member because they were already laughing. So they didn't want it to look out of sync. So they just were making jokes about something else to keep the laughter going. And yeah, when we stopped rolling, yeah, they couldn't stop laughing. I think we all were laughing, including the hotel manager.
So that segues into my next question. What are some interesting things about, you know, the media industry or just operator or producer that the average viewer would not know?
Your relationships are everything. You can have the greatest skill set, but if your relationships, I think, all right, here's one thing that a lot of people coming in don't realize, and this is understandable because I was one of them, is that people come in and they want the titles. They want to be the producer. They want to be the executive producer. Honestly, the power is there, but people understand that at the end of the day, the real power lies in your skill set. So you may have the title executive producer, but if you don't have the skill set, especially in video where everything shows, results show, people will see that and they will not respect your title. So I've held a lot of hats. I've done holding wires. I know how to now run audio. I can run a whole production set sometimes by myself, including lighting and audio. And sometimes I may not have the title, but I have the power and respect. And that's actually really what it is more than anything else. You can have the title all you want, but if you don't have that skill set with the title, you don't have no power anyway.
What have been some of the most memorable productions you've worked on and why?
Definitely, I did a show at Oxygen called Brooklyn 11223. This was way back in maybe 2011. It came on after Bad Girls Club. A lot of people didn't watch it, which was cool. But in the show, it was about some childhood friends in Bay Ridge. And I was forced to work in Bay Ridge, which is a neighborhood that is heavy Italian, a lot of racial divide there. I used to live in Bay Ridge in the 80s. So for me, it was nothing. So I had to deal with a lot of racial stuff amongst the cast members who kind of looked at me and didn't really want me there. And I said, hey, at the end of the day, I'm here. Look, you got to get this done, you know? So that was crazy. That was memorable a little bit. We were able to get that show done. They respected me in the end, and I got it done under budget. My work at This Was 50 was always crazy because it was never planned. Nothing was ever pre-planned there. And we did a few shows there, the Round Table, the Cindy's. Those were, you know, some of my memorable things. And then working at Bloomberg Television, which was interesting. We didn't have a studio desk at one point. So we filmed in the lobby while everybody was going to and from lunch. And we filmed our live interviews there. And to me, that spooked me out because I'm saying, what if somebody walks by and goes, you know, but everybody ignored the camera and it was cool. And I learned a lot. The one thing I will say in terms of, and I just mentioned a couple of things, but your greatest asset as a cameraman or producer is learning. Learn. You learn so much because without learning and understanding the skill sets, then you really you're just a statue.
In the last couple of years, you expanded your professional capabilities to include creating a lifestyle brand and then having a whole slate of digital properties that you produce for online. How did your earlier media experience kind of lay the groundwork for you to do these things?
I guessed. I guessed along the way. Well, I started the men's accessories line because I had burnout doing video production and being a camera operator. By that time, I had worked at Bloomberg. I did CNBC. I did SNY, which is the New York Mets baseball channel. I produced some studio shows there. And then I worked at Fox Business. And, you know, that was a pressure cooker there. And I think by that point, I was burned out. I didn't really have a break. I did a stint at some other networks that weren't, they lasted maybe all of 2 seconds. I was burned out and I wanted to kind of do something different. And I had an interest in fashion, so I just started that. I started on YouTube learning how to sew and doing that. With the media properties, you know, I co-own a couple of brands like G-Style and Tech We Like. That's my longtime business friend, Jason Anderson. He actually came under me as a photographer back in 2005. And, you know, he was just learning. And, you know, I had a couple of shoots that I was doing. I went ahead and just let him take over the shoot, in which was a rare, normally photographers want all the credit and everything like that. I gave him the shoot and just told him, go ahead and do it. And we've been cool ever since. So when he approached me about launching G-Style, I said, I'm all in, you know, I'll help out from the creative side. And then I eventually moved over into more of the business side, making sure our relationships with tech companies are cool and things like that. I don't know. I just, you know, I don't know. I just wake up and I keep a good prayer and I just try to make sure I don't look crazy or embarrass myself. That's really the formula. As long as I don't embarrass myself and I don't talk too much, you know, and that is a daily process.
So for students who are interested in learning more about getting in the production side of the media business, be it being a camera operator or producer, what resources do you suggest that they start to look into or plug into?
YouTube can be your best friend now because they have a lot of producers who have instructional videos on how they deal with production, how they deal with setting up cameras. And what I would say is look at a lot of short films because they're quick and fast. They have to put a storyline together so fast, you know, with a quick sequence, and just understand how you want a storyline to come out. That's all really. I think everything else is really your relationships. And once you get in front of the camera or you become a producer, in my opinion, you'll forge your own path. I can never tell anybody how to do that. But if you just make YouTube your best friend. There's so much you can learn from watching people's instructional videos. Not everything has to look like what you see on whatever. You can have your own vision. So the creative space is out there and it's for everybody.
If viewers want to learn more about your work, where can they find you online and on social?
I am on social at Chuck Holliday, and that's with 2 L's, Chuck Holliday. And that's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I speak. I definitely respond. I follow everybody. I'm very insightful. I have no problem speaking about, you know, the business, the behind the scenes. I have no problem helping people as well, because without helping others, we don't have community growth. So for me, you know, I want somebody to learn and be great so they could take my job. Like, I want that, because if not, then, you know, I don't want to be that 65-year-old video dude here when you have this talented 25-year-old person. No, I want people to learn and grow, and I want to help as many people as I can. I'm not getting any younger. I'm 44. So, you know, I want to teach and give my guidance and advice as much as possible to the people coming up. And yeah, I mean, again, the one thing I will say is learn. You will learn so much. Yes.
Lastly, what is the best piece of career advice you would give your younger self?
To be fearless. I wasn't fearless. I was nervous. I was scared. I wasn't willing to take risks. I wasn't really willing to to put my own creative juice into anything I was part of. And that's what I would tell myself: be fearless, because when you're fearless, you know, the sky's the limit. You know, and when you're not fearless, the limit's the sky. You know, but no, the one thing ambition starts the moment you wake up. That's what I would say. And, you know, it starts the moment you wake up. That's what you have to understand. And the moment you wake up, you've got to be creative and ready to go.
How much of that, I guess, vision for ambition derives from you growing up in New York City? Or do you think you would have had that in you otherwise?
Yeah, I do say it's an advantage being in New York, because you're exposed to everything. Growing up, I was exposed to Fight the Power, the video from Public Enemy, which was filmed literally a block away from where I grew up. Do the Right Thing was filmed 2 blocks. So yeah, you get to see everything, and you can't not be motivated. But also too, I think today's generation, regardless of where you live at, whether it's in Asheville, North Carolina, there's so much out there. There's so many great storytelling projects that you can do that may not necessarily be entertainment. They can be things like, you know, fishing or culinary. There's so many things that you could be as a producer that do not involve entertainment, which is why, my move from New York to Charlotte, I really wanted to focus on more things away from entertainment. There's so many things to get into. Just let YouTube be your oasis, and you can never go wrong in life. But honestly, you have to be fearless. You have to be fearless, and you have to be willing to learn.
Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story with us. Let's see if anyone has any additional questions. Our next session is going to be at 1 p.m. and we're going to fashionably travel the world with Anaya Richards. Thank you so
Ooh.
much, Chuck.
Thank you, Kiana. Thank you for having me.
Okay, y'all have a great day.
Thank you. You too.